So last time we pretty much stopped at the man in the middle attack. So remember that if Alice and Bob want to share a secret key, there is this significant problem, not because the Diffie-Hellman key exchange is not perfect. Actually, all key exchange problems they're all susceptible to this man in the middle attack. So to counter this problem, generally the most widely used solution is the digital signature. So in that case, if Alice sends something to Bob, and then when Bob returns, Bob not only returns this G to the power B, and then it also returns with its signature. So in that case, Alice can verify. And it works both ways as well. When Alice sends G to the A, Alice also attaches its signature. And in practical systems, it is important to know that which identity is which. So in the public key system, an identity usually is bound to the public key. So your identity is your public key. It pretty much looks like that. And we will talk about that later in the digital signature. Probably, I think next Monday. Yeah. Today we'll be talking about primality test. Yeah, when we finish this, we'll talk about primality test because it is really crucial to generate large primes. We'll try primality test first, and then we'll come back to the digital signature probably next week. So distribution of public keys in our three ways. So public announcement. So this is usually this type of thing. Although it's easy, there is no security at all. Actually, I don't know whether you guys have heard about an email encryption system called PGP. Yeah, PGP got the name from pretty good security. Okay. They actually use public announcement. So every email sender, you generate a key, a public key, private key. Okay, you generate yourself. There's nobody who checks whether or not you're valid. Okay, so that's PGP. But all of your email content are encrypted, and you're sure that when you receive when you receive an email, they always use your public key to encrypt, so nobody can intercept anything. Yeah, but the only problem is we are not sure about the identity because nobody does the bookkeeping of public keys. So so anybody can claim to be anybody. That's a problem. That's PGP. Okay. Well, but I mean, in practice, if it's not really crucial, then it is. Yeah, then it is okay. And so that's public announcement, and also publicly available directory. Okay. And then this type of thing, it depends on whether or not everybody has the authorization to write to that directory. If not, if there is a network administrator, okay, who actually does the bookkeeping, who actually checks whether or not an entity is the person she claims to be, then in that case, it is okay. So publicly available directory, it depends on how secure and also the authorization of this publicly available directory. Public key authority. This is, in this case, there is a public key authority. There's an authority that everybody trusts. For example, like on campus, we have a server, NTHU server. So everybody trusts that server, which is an authority. Okay. So that case, it is okay. Okay. So the security must be much better than previously. Public key certificates. Okay. There are companies who are working on this. They issue public key certificates, and then those companies, they are trusted as well. And there are in different parts of the world, there are usually different companies who are who are in charge of those parts. So public key certificates, for example, like in Taiwan, we have China Telecom, and also there are many other companies that issue certificates, and those companies, they are trusted by your browser. Okay, so for example, there is let's see. For example, like so let me show you guys. Okay. Okay, so let me drag. Yeah. So this is how this is a bank, mega bank. So what you can do is you check this, you click this. I'm using the Mac system, so it's here. But if you guys are using Windows, it may be different. Sometimes it's here. You have a lock sign. So and then you can check whether. So then you have this secure, right? And then here we have this is a certificate. We can show that certificate. It is verified by DigiCert. So you click more information. Oh, okay. So it's here. Yeah. Maybe drag it. So this is DigiCert, and this is a certificate. So the certificate is nothing more than, it's actually a text file. So, but there are a lot of there's a lot of information in that file, and also there's a certificate. It gives you a lot of the, here there is a check. Okay, so there are these information, okay, your location, your country, okay, and then issuer. So this issuer is a private company that you actually pay to get the certificate. And then these companies, they are making good business because issuing such certificate is almost free. I mean, there's no cost. You just have some server and then you generate these signatures. Pretty much what it is it lists the information, okay, and then it attaches a signature. So the signature is bound to that information. So you can be sure that the information is these information are trustworthy. So if you trust this company and everything this company signs, you will trust. So then you have a chain of trust. Okay. And then, there is a fundamental question. How does the browser know that this company is trustworthy? How do you know? Okay. Anybody else? you have to trust someone in order to trust anything that follows, anybody that follows, right? How do you trust the first person or the first entity？ 对吧？你总要相信一个人啊，这个一间公司，你怎么知道这间公司真的？知道吗？我们会知道。How do you know? How do you know?
会有 root 的那个
对
database 安装在系统。
对，没错，就必须这样子。你一定要最终要有一个 root， 要有个 root。这些公司大概，这世界上的这些公司大概可能就是常见的大概10几20家，它已经那个 root 已经在你的那个 browser 里面了，所以你要相信这个，然后他签了你才能相信别人，因为它是这样的。所以一个公司要成功，除了其实演算法都公开的，大家都一样，这些公司也不会去研究新的演算法，演算法都是公开。但是呢，你怎么能够让你的这间公司成为比方说这是 Firefox 的一个 root， 啊，这就是对啊，这个就是困难的地方，对，所以你先占了就先赢。So anyway, you have to have some root information that's already installed in your browser. Okay. And then these big companies, there are like 10 of them. For example, like there are many. Some of them they are bound to network company, like IP address companies. For example, like GoDaddy also does that. And also, this is DigiCert. There is verified by Visa and then Ford, and these companies. Okay, and then in Taiwan we have China Telecom. Okay, these companies. Okay, they issue certificates. So yeah, so let me come here. Yeah, so they issue certificates, public key certificates. So a certificate is just some information file with a signature, and then that signature can be verified by your browser. Okay. So once you have a root, then you can establish a chain of trusts. Anything that this root says with a signature, you can trust. So the public announcement weaknesses forgery. So pretty much this type, there is no security at all. PGP uses this, so it's just for fun. Yeah, you really can't trust such system. It's just for fun only. Publicly available directory. So it depends on the directory. But generally speaking, such directories they're vulnerable to. They can be written by many people, and then there is probably no good mechanism to restrict the read-write operation on anything. So it's vulnerable to tampering or forgery. Public key authority. So you have an authority like NTHU. Yeah, this you have security. Okay. Public key authority. Certificates. Okay. So this will allow you to do key exchange, okay, without an authority. We have once you can be sure of the person you're communicating to, you can apply diffie-Hellman key exchange. So you can exchange key. So you don't have the authority does not have to be online all the time. It just issues a certificate. Okay, so that's public key. We'll talk more about that. Okay. Distribution of secret key using public key. This is very often used because public key algorithms are slow. So most likely, instead of using public key algorithms to encrypt, we actually most likely use public key cryptography key exchange and the digital signatures. We really we rarely use, for example, RSA to do encryption. Yeah, we do key exchange and then we will use symmetric crypto systems, AES, because that's a lot faster. Okay, so that's yeah. Let's move on to the next topic. Yeah. This is also an important topic. We call primality testing. So so far, everybody has more or less some knowledge about, some experience about public key cryptography. We know that lots of the algorithms, they involved in large primes, right? So this is really important. Oh, by the way, I just posted this online today, so generating large primes is essential in most algorithms, most public key cryptography algorithms. And so this lecture is dedicated to generating large primes. So far, I mean, it would be wonderful to design an algorithm that generates large prime directly. But so far, to the best of our knowledge, we don't have such algorithms. So there's no, in other words, there's no algorithm that directly generates large primes. Not that we know of at this moment, okay? So the algorithms, they are not generating primes. They are testing primes. So you generate random numbers, and then you test them whether it's prime or not. So the problem becomes testing primes. That is why we said this is called primality testing. And testing primes, well, if you think about it, the problem will be reduced to, I mean, generating a large prime involves a lot more things. And if you kind of reduce this number, you focus to generate to testing primes, that will be more easy. That will be easier and more manageable. So far, there's no algorithm that can generate primes directly. Okay, so this is prime. A prime is integer. We all know that. Okay, that only has two positive divisors, one and itself. Okay. Okay, so we're not working on factorization. Okay, we're just testing primes. So that's this lecture is dedicated to. So factorization gives you more information. It lists all factors. Obviously, if there's no other factors, it's a prime. Yeah, but there is another class of algorithms that are not factorization, because factorization is harder. So there are many other algorithms that just give you more some information from the side. Okay, so then those algorithms are more manageable, because factorization so far cannot if it's used in for example attacking RSA, it cannot be done in polynomial time. That's a problem, factorization. Okay. But primality can be decided in polynomial time. So that is different. Okay. And first, let me introduce another technical term. A number that is not prime is called composite. Okay, so this is composite. And then all these algorithms we're introducing. We're going to introduce. They are called primality test. They are not actually testing primes. They're testing compositeness. The reason is it's much easier to know a number is a composite than a number is prime. So these algorithms, they're not actually testing primes. Just give you an example. Let's see. One example, 35, okay? In order to know that 35, well, let's see, we don't know whether or not it's prime, okay? In order to prove it's not a prime, it's easy, because you only, if you're lucky, you just guess two numbers, and then you multiply them, they're equal. Then you know this is not prime, right? So it's composite. But in order to say this word, in order to determine this number is prime, that's much harder, because you have to go through, go from 2, 3, 4 until like, somewhere in the middle, from maybe 35. That's a lot harder. So to disprove a number to be prime is a lot easier, because one case, if there's one case, it violates. You have a factorization, then it is prime. Then it is not prime. So compositeness is a lot easier. So all these algorithms, they are actually compositeness test. Let's take a look at the naive primality test. Okay. So the input integer. So let's say you have an input integer 2. Okay. And then the output is binary, either prime or composite binary. Okay. So we use a for loop. So from I goes from 2 to n minus 1. Okay, and then if you do test division, it's prime. So this is a naive primality test. That algorithm isn't good because it's slow. Actually, it's not polynomial time. I just want to make sure that if you do you guys know this is not polynomial time? Just want to make sure. Okay, so for the so if a problem is polynomial time, that means you get your input, right? And then you get your output. And then the running time is if the running time is polynomial to your input, then it's polynomial time. Let's take a look at the running time. So we only have a for loop. So I goes from 2 to n minus 1. So this for loop runs this, which is a polynomial. So why this is not a polynomial time algorithm? 好，我其他同学看看，我就先确定是不是大家都知道，为什么这不是 polynomial time？N 不是 polynomial 吗？对 ，So why? This is polynomial, right? Just want to make sure that everybody knows. So the polynomial time or exponential time algorithm, it depends on the size of your input. So your input is an integer n, okay? But how large is this input? Let's say you have an n, right? How many bits do you need to represent this n? You actually need this. Right? You need this many bits. So this is the size. This is the size of the input. And then this is the running time. So the running time, I mean, with respect to log n, this is actually exponential. So this is exponential time. Okay. Just want to make sure that everybody knows. Okay. So this is naive primality test. And this is still a naive. It's much better, but it is still naive. So this is an improvement from the previous one. This previous one, we go from 2 to n minus 1, which is unnecessary, because if you have a number n, okay, let's see, you can, if it is not prime, then you must be able to factorize, okay, for example, like PQ or something, okay, so PQ, okay, or any, so this PQ may not need to be prime. I mean, maybe this P of PQ can be further factorized, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, you have, suppose n is equal to the product of two numbers PQ. One of them must be smaller than square root n, right? Smaller than or equal to square root n. So you actually don't need to go up to n minus 1. You only need to go up to n, square root n, that's enough. Because if you test divide these numbers, you go up to a square root n, you will either find P or Q. If you find either one, then you know it is not prime. So it does not need to go that far. We only need to go, actually this is less than the middle. Square root n is still good, right? It's much better. However, this is still exponential time, right? The still naive primality test, the running time becomes this, right? Which is still exponential, right? Yeah, so this is equal to something like this, right? This is still exponential with respect to log n, okay? There's another way called the sieve of Eratosthenes. This is an ancient Greek. He has this idea. He basically used an array to actually bookkeep all these numbers. So he built up an array, and then the array, the number is true if it's prime, and false if it's a composite. Okay. So basically, he uses a for loop. So we use a for loop. Okay. So starting from the beginning, we set all multiples of this AI to be false. So this is a way of bookkeeping. So for example, initially you have 2, 3, 4, okay, something like this. Okay. So set the first element of A. So 2 is true. Okay. And then we set its multiples to false. So 4, 6, 8, they are all false. 4, 6, false, something like that. Okay, and then we keep going. Okay, and then we keep going. So we set this to false, and then we keep going. Okay, and then if it's not set, for example, like this 3 will be true. Okay, and then we just keep going. Okay, so that's sieve of Eratosthenes. These are just history. Okay. They are all exponential time. Now let's move on to some primality testing algorithms that are really in use today. Okay, there are 2 categories of primality tests. Number 1 is probabilistic. Number 2 is deterministic. So the probabilistic is like, it will give you a really good estimate. For example, like you can the input is a large number, and then if you run this algorithm, they will give you a good. They give you like within. They give you like at least 99.999%. This number is prime, something like that. It's probabilistic. Deterministic is much better, right? It gives a definite answer, yes or no. Okay. However, there are 2 kinds of algorithms. We can easily guess that. The probabilistic ones must be faster, right? Deterministic one must be slower. Yeah, because this gives you a definite answer, yes, no. Okay. So usually this is slow. Okay, and then there are this Miller-Robin. This is which is the main algorithm we're going to teach in this lecture. Our main algorithm. There are 2 versions. There is a probabilistic version and also a deterministic version. This deterministic version is just a conjecture. This is true only if the so-called generalized Riemann hypothesis is true. So we still don't know that yet, because the generalized Riemann hypothesis still remain a hypothesis. We don't know whether it is true. And then the other 2, okay, this one, the worst case is exponential time. But in most cases they're okay, but the worst case is exponential time. Okay, and then the probabilistic method, it's all probabilistic. So there are these algorithms. Okay, they run fast. And then the most recent one is called AKS. This was defined this was proposed when I was a student at the University of Minnesota. That three Indian researchers they found a deterministic way to do primality test, and their algorithm runs in polynomial time. This is a breakthrough. Yeah, so because of that, their algorithm is they claim that prime is in P. Yeah, that's their research paper. Their paper is entitled "Prime is in P," because for all these years we don't know whether or not prime is in P. We don't know yet, but this problem has been open for a while. This is the only algorithm that actually gives a constructive proof prime is in P without using any hypothesis or something. So this is, however, this algorithm is theoretically good, but only theoretically. That means it's in P, but the leading coefficients can be really big. So if you run it in the real world, sometimes theoretically good algorithms are not good. There can be a big gap between theory and practice. Okay, so for example, like let's say you compare this with this. Okay, the cyclotomic deterministic, the cyclotomic probabilistic. This, yeah. The worst case is exponential time, but generally it's okay. Okay? And then here, this algorithm is in polynomial time, but the leading constant is just way too big. So if you have some experience in using MATLAB, for example, like doing linear, for example, like linear programming. So linear programming, integer programming, there are the current algorithm that's used to implement linear programming in MATLAB is not running in theory. It is not running in polynomial time. Such an algorithm exists, but it's not used in MATLAB. Why? The reason is, in most cases, if you run an algorithm, it's very slow. Okay? They actually use an algorithm that runs in exponential time. So you guys can have an idea how big this gap is. So exponential time algorithms, maybe its running time, for example, it's something like this, right? That's exponential time. But polynomial time, if you have polynomial time algorithms, your running time may be something like this. This is polynomial time. So not always, it's not always that polynomial time algorithms are good. If your degree is too big and your leading constant, this is just the degree, and then you have a constant. You have a leading constant. If your constant is extremely big, then your polynomial time algorithm is not good enough. But anyway, this is still AKS. It is still a breakthrough. Okay. Let's take a look at easy running time. Miller-Robbin time. Probabilistic version is polynomial time. Okay. Cyclotomic is the exponential time, but it's actually running fast. Almost feel like polynomial time. Elliptic curve, we don't know. Yeah, that looks like okay. AKS polynomial time, but the degree and leading constant is way too big. Okay. Let's take a look at the first primality test algorithm. So this is based on the Fermat's little theorem. when we talked about the Euler's theorem, I said I already mentioned there's a Fermat's little theorem, which is a special case of Euler's theorem. Okay? This is a special case. So Euler's theorem, if you guys know, Euler's theorem is this. Okay, for any A in this set. Okay, this is Euler's theorem. This is Euler's theorem. So if we substitute this n for a p, for prime number, then the result becomes the Fermat's little theorem. Okay. The n we substitute for p. Okay. Okay, so we substitute this n for p. That means, so the condition becomes if A in ZP star. Okay, this condition is equivalent to A does not divide P. Yeah, because if A is in ZP star, the only thing that A can't be is 0, or the multiples of P. Okay, so that becomes this condition. And then this condition is phi n is the number of elements in ZP star, which are relatively prime with P. So in that case, this is equal to P minus 1. Okay, that's Fermat's little theorem. It's all based on this theorem. Okay, so this is such type of trimality test is something like this. We don't factorize a number. Okay, what we do is we try to find a relationship in number theory, which is related to a prime number, something like that. So if here, this is a theorem in number theory, the Fermat's little theorem, in which you have prime number. Okay, and then this theorem holds if P is prime. Okay, so the logic tells us, okay, if this theorem does not hold, then P must not be prime. Right? Just be careful with the logic. The logic says if P is prime, this relation holds. Okay, it's a necessary condition. If P is a prime, okay, P being a prime is a necessary condition to let this hold. So in other words, if this does not hold, then P must not be prime. So that's a composite test. Okay? It doesn't tell you that if P is not prime, then it does not hold. Okay? It's not this way. So if P is prime, okay, then some property, let's say this property, okay, holds. Okay, so this is necessary condition 啊，这是若 A 则 B 嘛，对不对？但是你回来的时候你要记得，回来的时候是非 B 则非 A， 这边错，然后这个才错。所以回来是非 B 则非 A， 你不能说 P 如果不是 prime 的话它是不对，这样不对哦，这样不对，因为这个是 necessary condition。所以为什么说我们讲这些东西几乎都是什么 compositeness test？ 因为几乎所有的东西都是跟 prime 有关的。这数论里面有很多公式，这个是其中一个。后面大家讲 Miller-Rabin 另外一个，它跟 prime 有关。它跟 prime 有关呢，那就是说它是 prime 的话，它会成立。然后呢，这样的话就会说，如果这个 property 不 hold， 好，所以 so if this property does not hold， so this is not prime. It's not prime. Right? So this actually means P is composite. So that's the reason why I said most of these algorithms, they are compositeness tests. The reason is, I mean, most relationship we found in number theory, they are related to prime. So they are true if P is prime. there is no theorem that I know so far, which is true if P is not prime. If you have this type of theorem and then you make use of it, maybe you can really come up with a primality test. However, it's not. So that's it's that's the reason. 对，所以我还讲对吧？因为是非 B 则非 A， 所以说基本上这些数论这些定理几乎都是绝大部分，至少我看过，从来没有说哪个定理好有用的定理啦，有用的定理是说它不是 prime 才会对的，我没看过这种定理，对吧？所以它大部分都是prime 才会对，就像这个 Fermat's little theorem， 它prime 才会对嘛。那我们要目的是要去找违反它的东西，所以你如果找到一个违反它的东西，那你就可以证明它不是 prime， 基本上是这个思维，所以就为什么叫 completeness test 这样。Okay, so the idea is to find an instance that violates Fermat's little theorem. So this will be a strong proof. This will be a sufficient proof to claim that P is not prime because Fermat's little theorem fails. Okay, so let's see. If we can find find such an instance, such that the Fermat's little theorem is violated, does not hold, then this number n can be proved to not to be a prime. So that's the idea. Find something to violate our algorithm. Okay, so the Fermat's primality test is easy. We just randomly find such a. Okay, we randomly choose. Okay, and I hope that this can be violated. Yeah. And generally speaking, it's a lot easier to find such a as compared to, if you really want to prove that a number is not prime, you really have to go up from number 2 to m minus 1 to check everything. So that is really inefficient. So a much better way is you have a relationship like this, and then you calculate this type of, this is just modular exponentiation. So you calculate this, okay? And then if you are smart enough, you can choose these numbers in an efficient way. So then it will, you'll soon find it's a composite. So it's actually pretty good. In some cases, you can pass the test. The number of elements that violates this P, this number, this Fermat's little theorem is generally not too bad. Yeah. Okay, so there's another technical term for this case. So if you find a case and find an A, so that n passes the test, okay, we can only conclude that this case passed, right? We cannot conclude it's prime, right? If you find an A such that it violates the Fermat's little theorem, we're done. But if you find an A such that the Fermat's little theorem still holds, it doesn't tell you anything. Okay? You're unfortunate. So this instance is wasted. Okay? So we cannot conclude he's prime. Okay? And there are worse cases. So if this is we cannot conclude it's prime. So we can only call it, there's a name we call it a pseudo prime. But in many cases, pseudo primes can be composites. Okay, so in that case, this A is called a Fermat liar. So this is a liar. It doesn't tell you the truth. It's a Fermat liar. Okay. Now there is a question. So this is a really important question. Okay, really important. If for any possible n, okay, any不好意思，我这边写错了啊，这边写错了。Yeah, this is a mistake. This is not incongruent to. This should be congruent. So if for any A such that Fermat's little theorem holds, right? Can we conclude N is prime? So that's. So in other words, if we have this property that, okay, if P is not prime, we can then always find some A, so that it violates the Fermat's little theorem. Then it is essential in this Fermat's primality testing. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is not true. Yeah. So this is called a Carmichael number. This number is such numbers are not very there are not a lot of Carmichael numbers, but they do exist. Okay, they do exist. Not a lot. So, for example, here we can list Carmichael numbers which was smaller than 100,000. Okay, there are like about 20 something, right? Right, like 17 or something. These are Carmichael numbers, so they fail. You know, these numbers, if you use Fermat's little theorem, you'll always pass for any n. So these are called Carmichael numbers. So in other words, the existence of Carmichael numbers pretty much rendered the Fermat's primality test junk. It's useless. So that is why. So let's take a look at Fermat's primality test. The input is integer, output is binary. So for any I, we choose a random integer a, okay, and then we verify this Fermat's little theorem. Okay. If we are lucky, then we find a violation, and r is not equal to 1. Then we know, oh, bingo, it's not prime. We're done. But keep doing that for all possible n. If they're all passed, then we return prime. Okay. So this algorithm works for all non-Carmichael numbers. Even though there are not a lot, 17 Carmichael numbers below 10,000, below 100,000, but still not good enough. So we need definitely we need a different approach. So this is called Miller-Robin. But it's also a compositeness test. But this is the main algorithm. It gives us there is a theoretical proof that no such Carmichael numbers, no such numbers analogous to Carmichael numbers exist. So they will always if the number to be tested is a composite, you will always find some instance so that it will not be able to pass this test. So let's take a break. Okay, let's continue the Miller-Robin test. So it's also a compositeness test, as I mentioned earlier. No algorithm is the actual primality test. It does not give a proof that a number is prime. Okay, it only tells us that with a very high probability, okay, n is prime. Okay. So such algorithms using the language of randomized algorithm, it's called the Las Vegas type. Let's take a look at the fact. Basically, this is a joint publication of Miller and Robin, and then they exploit the properties of finding square roots. We know that Robin has really deep understanding about finding square root mod something. So now to test whether or not it's a number is prime, they simply look at the square root of 1. That's the easiest. That's the easiest thing. And then this already gives us really good information about whether this n is prime. Let's take a look. If p is prime, okay, and the square root, we're trying to find the square root of 1, okay, then obviously we have two square roots. We have plus minus 1. There's no problem. No problem. Okay. So if p is prime, then when we work on zp star, it's actually the same as saying that we're working in a field, fp. So then we only have two roots. Okay. And then we can also check the Fermat's-Little theorem. Okay. The Fermat's-Little theorem. Now, the idea is that the Fermat's primality test only does one test as compared to the many tests of the Miller-Robbins we'll explain later. Okay, so let's see. Okay, the idea is to find. Let me briefly tell you guys what it is doing. The idea is to find whether there is any other square root, the square root of 1, other than plus minus 1. Because we know that we already have two square roots, plus minus 1. Okay. If we can find another square root, then we actually find more than two square roots. That's enough to say that p is not prime. Okay, so that's the idea. So for the Fermat's-Little theorem, we do the test. This is a Fermat's-Little theorem, a n minus 1. This is the test, right? We will check whether or not it is equal to 1. So this is Fermat's-Little theorem. Not just the Fermat's-Little theorem. What we want to do is we want to find its square root. The thing is, we cannot calculate the square roots directly because we don't know whether or not n is prime. So what we do here is, instead of calculating the square roots, we factorize this n minus 1. So n minus 1, if it's an even number, then we can divide by 2. If it's an even number, we divide by 2. So we can take out all multiples of 2, all factors of 2, okay, and then calculate this modular exponentiation. So that is not calculating the square root. That is calculating modular exponentiations. So, for example, like we look at this a. So n minus 1 is this m times 2 to the power of k. That means we can actually have k square roots before that. So prior to that, we have a m 2 to the power of k minus 1. Okay, so this number must be a square root of this. Okay, so we can do the square, and then if we keep going, it becomes this m 2k minus 2. We can keep going, right? Until we reach this point, m. Here, this is an odd number, so we cannot go any more. But the thing is, we compare these numbers and then look at their how they behave. So maybe I can write it here, so then you guys know what I'm doing. So am, so this is something, and then we have am times 2. Okay, and then we have am 2 to the power of k minus 1. We compare these numbers. This is equal to n. Okay. These numbers give us a lot of information about the primality or the compositeness of n. Okay. So the first thing is we we look at this number. If this number is 1, this number must be 1. Otherwise, it violates the Fermat's little theorem. Okay, so if this number is not 1, then we simply stop and then return composite. Okay. Now the thing is, we can keep looking these numbers before that. For anything here, for here, we know that if we look at this number is actually the square root of this, right? So what are the possible square roots? We have plus minus 1, and then we may have any other. So any other, we say something else. So it could be plus minus 1 or something else. Let's look at what gives you most information. Okay? If it's 1 or it's minus 1 or something else, let's take a look. If it's 1, then no big deal. If it's minus 1, also no big deal. But it's the something else that gives you the information. If it's something else, what does that mean? It means you actually have more than 2 square roots. This number has more than 2 square roots, so we don't have to keep going anymore, and it's not prime. That's the information, okay? So, if you get something else, then bingo. Then you really catch it. Okay, so if it's minus 1, this is the most unfortunate. If it's minus 1, this is really unfortunate. We can't go on. There's nothing we can do. If it's 1, what we can do is we can keep looking at the thing before that, on the left of that. So if it's 1, then we look at the previous one. Let's see, we have 3 possibilities, right? So we just keep looking at the ones. Okay. Once you get a minus 1, that's the unfortunate case. Okay, this case does not give you any information at all. So what we really want to do is something like this. If you look at these this whole thing, starting from a to the power of m to a to the n, okay, you look at this chain. This is something that's really useful. Okay, this is what we want. Okay. There are many cases. There are cases like this. This is unfortunate. If you end up with a minus 1, then you're unfortunate. This is useless. This one's bingo. Okay, this is useless. Okay, and also it's also possible that they're all 1s. This is also useless. Okay, these two are useless. So the thing is, we actually this is the way we think. Actually, when we check the condition, we would reorganize a little bit because it makes it easier. We actually, because the actual calculation is from left to right. Because when you calculate this, it's easier to calculate this. You just do a square, right? You can't calculate backwards. Yeah, you calculate forward. So let's take a look. So look at this condition. Okay. Either a to the m is 1. What is a to the m? A to the m is the leftmost. If a to the m is congruent to 1, that's this case, useless. Okay. Or this. Okay. From I goes to 0. When I 0, that's a to the m. Okay. To k minus 1. So I goes from 0 to k minus 1 is this part. I goes to 0 from k minus 1. Here, this part. If this part, you actually end up with a minus 1. That's also an unfortunate case because I said if you have an minus 1, it doesn't give you any information at all. Okay, so that's another useless case. So what's the one that's really useful is this. A to the m is not equal to 1, okay? Actually, and then a to this part is not equal to minus 1. What does that mean? Okay. It means this part, we don't have a minus 1, including a to the m, okay? This part, we don't have any plus minus 1. And then a to the m is not equal to 1. That means actually a to the m is something else. If you combine these two conditions, because this condition, this I goes from 0. Okay, this condition covers the case where a to the m is not equal to minus 1. Okay, so altogether these two conditions means a to the m, okay, is something else. A to the m is something else, and then this minus 1 does not appear here. Okay. What does that mean? So the actually, if we look at this condition, it actually means this one is something else, okay, and then this one is 1, and then in the middle there is no minus 1. What does that mean? It means there must be some point that you have something else jump directly to 1. 这部分我们再仔细想一下，好，这个 condition 是什么？就是说呢，这 condition 只是把它重组而已，也没什么特别的。就是说最左边是 something else 啊，最左边上，我刚刚讲最左边 something else 是因为最左边不等于1，好，然后这个条件也包含了最左边。这个条件是从最左边到右边的第二个，啊，这个也包含最左边。那这个条件就是说它不等于负1的意思，所以这实际上这是最左边也不能等于负1，所以最左边就是 something else， 对不对？好，所以这个条件是说最左边 something else， 然后从最左边到右边的这个倒数第二个，中间没有负1，这是什么意思？那就是说呢，你最后边是1嘛，对吧？最后边是1嘛，那你这1呢？你最后边是1，那你如果往左边去看，这个也可能是1，可能是1，可能是1嘛，对不对？也可能是 something else 嘛，总之没有负1。但是呢，你今天只能是1，只能是 something else， 就代表你从最右边这个1开始出发，你到某一个点，你可能就下一个就直接跳到 something else 了，对不对？是这样，懂我意思吗？好，那你也有可能是说，你从最右边的1开始走，到了一定程度变成 something else， 是这样而已。总之，你一定会产生一个事情，就是发生一种情形，就是你直接从 something else 到它的平方下一个平方变成是1，就这个意思。所以，如果你直接从 something else 到1的话，这个就是告诉我们，实质上它有至少3个那个至少3个 square root， 那这个它就不是 prime， 基本上是这样子。那没有问题。So this condition is a little it's a reorganization of the conditions, so it's not the way we think. That is why it takes some time to really understand what is going on. Anyway, the idea is not too complicated. There is something else on the leftmost position, and then on the right it must be 1. On the right, if it's not 1, then it violates the Fermat's-Little theorem. So on the right it must be 1. Okay, and then in the middle, there's no minus 1. Okay, so this actually guarantees, it ensures us, in the middle, you must have a position, okay, in which the left one jumps directly from something else to a 1, which will imply there are at least 3 square roots of 1. Okay, so that's the idea. So this is a much more enhanced version of Fermat's test. primality test. So we can think of it this way. So why does Fermat's primality test fail? Because it only checks the right part. There's so many things in the middle that you actually ignore. Okay. So that's the idea. Okay. So similarly, when we also have the special term for the special term, and now that's the same as the strong liar, Fermat's liar. Here we have a strong liar. A strong liar is if you can pass the Miller-Robbin test, okay, for some number, but it's not prime, then we call this case a strong liar. What's different from Fermat's test is that Miller-Robbin actually theoretically analyzed the number of strong liars. Okay. They actually theoretically analyzed, and then you can show that the number of non-liars is at least 1/4 of n, which is huge. Okay, so there are not too many liars there. So theoretically proves. Let's take a look at the pseudocode. Okay, so we do these pre-computations. We pull out factors of 2, and then we compute. We compute this. Here we go from left to right. We first calculate this and then from left to right, because the calculation only goes from left to right. Okay. So let's take a look. Okay. So if y is not congruent to 1, y is from the leftmost position. Leftmost here. So y is not equal to 1. Okay. Y is not equal to n minus 1. We check whether or not. Okay. So we look at this j, right? J is y squared, and then we check whether or not it's equal to -1. Okay. So oh, by the way. So this is. This n minus 1 is actually -1, because when we do mod n, this is -1. So this condition actually means y is not equal to +-1。这是 n 减就是负1的意思，因为 mod n 啊，因为 mod n 的关系。然后就一直平方啊，对，看它是不是对1。So this condition actually is the same as checking whether or not this y is something else. Okay. Yeah. So that's the algorithm. So that's. Yeah. Let's take a look at some concrete example. So we actually choose a Carmichael number in this case. That will be very informative. Yeah, because that's the number. That's the cases where the Fermat's testing failed. So let's check. So n is 2,465. Okay, and then we choose. So.这个跟同学抱歉一下，因为我的这个表刚好反过来，我 I 等于0.1，我应该把它倒过来写，好吧？我把它倒过来写。Yeah. So I apologize. I apologize for this. I actually reverse this table because the direction is inconsistent with the direction here. Anyway, let's take a look. Okay. So this is when I equal to 5. That's the rightmost condition. If anyone fails, okay, to be 1, A. So yeah. Yeah, here. We can take a look at this. Okay. Well, you can choose any A. If you choose A to be like this, then this violates the Fermat's little theorem. Okay, so this violates Fermat, so it's not prime. So for these cases, the Fermat's test is not good enough. Okay, so we look at things before that. Here's the case. This is something else to 1. Okay, there's something else to 1. So here, this part will be catched by running the Miller robin. Same here. Same thing like here. Okay. So let's see. This case is not good. This case is useless because this is something else. This is -1, and then you go from -1 to 1. So this is not good. So this is useless. As we can see that all other numbers can tell us, all other test cases tell us that n is not prime. So if we just randomly choose this A, right? We actually randomly choose A. Here on the table we have 7 different A's. Only 1 failed. The other 6 all tells us that n is not prime. So this is so we can see how powerful this is. 7个 case 只有这个没有，其他全部统统挑出来。这边挑一个，对不对？something else 到1嘛，那这个就违反Fermat something else 到1，所以是蛮强大的。So this is really pretty strong. Yeah, it's really good algorithm. We have a theorem. Yeah, this is the main contribution of Fermat's of Miller robin. So given n is bigger than 9, the number of strong liars are not too many, only less than 1/4. So that means at least like 75% are not strong liars. This is pretty strong. This is phi n, it's not n because there's no direct relationship between phi n. But anyway, phi n is less than n. At most it's n-1. Okay? phi n 已经小于等于 n， 所以它是这个 phi n 小于等于 n， 因为 phi n 是你从1到 n 减1去算，跟它不互质的，所以你只能扣掉嘛，所以它是小于等于 n。那你如果 phi n 是小于等于 n， 那你实际上是 n 的话，你假设除以 n 的话，它是不是比1/4更少？换句话说，它的 strong liar 是比1/4更少。而且你如果不是 prime 的话，你是 prime 的话 ，phi n 就跟 n 几乎一样，因为 phi n 就等于 n 减1。如果不是 prime 的话，你这个 phi n 会降低很多，其实是小很多的。所以你真正的 strong liar 其实是非常少的，比1/4还少很多的。但至少你一定是1/4嘛，对不对 ？So we can think of it this way. So phi n must be less than n because the largest possible phi n is n-1. That's the case where n is prime. But if n is not prime, phi n must be much smaller than n. Okay, and then this theorem tells us that the number of strong liars divided by phi n is less than 1/4, which means the number of strong liars divided by n must be less than 1/4. It's even smaller. So b divided by n, that's a random, that's a probability that we just randomly pick a number a and then do the test. So the probability of being a strong liar is not much. It's pretty small. So that is why when we keep doing that, okay, every time when we pass the test, we're sure that 75% this is prime. And then you keep doing that, okay, up to some point then we know that, okay, with a really, really high probability, it's prime, right? So that's the case. So we do every trial. We do every trial. Every trial, it gives us this probability. The probability is 1 minus this. Let's say we do m trials. 做 n 次嘛，对不对？我们假设这个 Miller Robin 做了 n 次，做 n 次，然后你一次是 strong line 的1/4，那2次又是 strong line， 它就 exponentially decrease 所以你只要大概做 log n 次，它就已经很准了。So roughly speaking, if you do that log n times, then the probability of failure is really small. So practically, if you want to control the failure probability to 10 to the power of -5, it's very easy to do that because in engineering, this is what we want, right? The failure probability from an engineering point of view. However, this does not give us a guaranteed approach. It's not a guaranteed approach, right? So there is something called a generalized Riemann hypothesis, which is a really big theorem. This is also one of a really big conjecture. This is something unsolved so far. Maybe one of the top 10 most difficult math questions of this century to be solved. The generalized Riemann hypothesis. If this is true, then the Miller-Robbie primality test can be deterministic. If you run it up to 2 to the this many times, 2 to the power 2 times log n squared. If you run it this many times, then it will be deterministic. Okay. So that's primality. Okay, now let's move on to signature, digital signature. Okay, so digital signature. We just mentioned earlier that that's because the key management weakness we need digital signature is also one of the most important building blocks of modern cryptography. We really have to make sure of the identity you're communicating to. Okay, so let's take a look. So it's a data string which associates a message. So in other words, this data string takes the input from a message. So one input is a message. The other input is a key. Okay. And the digital signature has 2 algorithms. There is a signature generation algorithm. Okay, that's for producing a signature. So legitimate users, the person who possesses a private key, can generate a signature. The signature is an output of the digital signature algorithm. So it's a generation algorithm and a verification algorithm. A verification algorithm takes the public key. So everybody can run the verification algorithm because everybody knows the public key. Okay? Generation algorithm takes the private key as input. Right? Okay. So digital signatures can provide authentication. So a person is really that person she claims to be. And also data integrity. The data associated with the signature is not changed. Because if it's changed, then it will not pass the verification algorithm. It will give you a false output. Non-repudiation, 中文叫不可抵赖性. So this is something you cannot repudiate. That actually means like if you have, for example, you are buying something on Shopee, okay, and then you click buy, okay, you click buy, and then the signature will be generated. And that signature depends on your private key, okay? So you are really the person who press the buy button, and then you cannot repudiate, okay? Then you cannot repudiate. This is something that only asymmetric crypto systems can do. Okay? No symmetric algorithms can provide such functionalities. For example, I mean, encryption itself also provides data authentication and data integrity. Let's consider this case. Let's consider. So we have so two parties share the same key. So this is Alice. So Alice and Bob. Two parties share the same key K. And then Alice sends an encrypted message. Alice and Bob shares a secret key K. Right? And then Alice sends this message. And then you're Bob. You receive this this encrypted message, and then you decrypt it using K. Let's see. Do we have authentication? Can Bob be sure that this message is really sent by Alice? Yeah. Because Bob only shares key K with Alice. No other person possesses key K. Okay. And then Bob knows that this message does not come from himself, right? So he can be sure that, okay, authentication, no problem. Data integrity. Has this data been tampered with? No. Because if the data has been tampered with, then there's no way you can recover the message. You cannot decrypt. So this is okay. But we have a problem of non-repudiation. Let's see. Let's consider the case. So, the A and B. This Alice is a vendor. Okay, Alice is a vendor on Shopee, and then B is a customer. Okay, and then you buy something. Bob buys something from Alice. And then Bob shares a secret key with Alice. And then the button buy, the buy button, actually results in some secret information like key M. This M means buy, right? So we have some information here, buy. This M contains the information buy, and then encrypted with the key, right? And then Bob sends to Alice, okay, this information. Now, problem comes. Bob denies that. I didn't buy. So both Alice and Bob go to the court. The judge has to make a decision. Alice said, I already sent Bob the item, but Bob denies. Bob denies the fact that he had bought the item. Okay. And Bob says this to the judge. Bob says, I didn't buy it. Alice fakes this information herself. Okay. So is it possible for the judge to tell whether this EK is generated by Bob or EK is generated by Alice herself? There's no way you can tell because both parties share the same key. That is why you don't have the non-repudiation in this case, if you're using symmetric cryptography. So symmetric cryptography, in some sense, you can achieve many other things as well. 1, 2, 3, timestamping is okay, but not the non-repudiation because they all involve. Well, when you're involving both parties, and then non-repudiation means you have to have only one of them that knows the private key in order to achieve the non-repudiation. Okay. So this can only be achieved by asymmetric cryptography. This is beyond the scope of symmetric cryptography. So that's not enough. That's not enough. Desirable properties. Number 1, it should be efficient to compute by the signer. Number 2, it should be easy to to be verified by everybody. Okay. Number 3, it should be computationally infeasible to forge. Number 3. Okay. We can divide, generally speaking, we can divide the digital signature scheme into 2 categories: message recovery and appendix. The message recovery actually contains both the plain text and the signature. They're all together. So this is message recovery. But this message cannot be open to everybody. Yeah, only the person who has the private key can. No. The message is open to everybody because everybody possesses the public key. But you have to run the verification algorithm to recover the message. Appendix is another one. So the appendix, you take the information from the plain text, and then you run the signature algorithm, and then it produces a bit string that's attached to the end of the plain text, and then the plain text is just sent using plain text without any change. This is appendix, and both of them have randomized and deterministic versions. Yeah. In practice, appendix is used much more frequently than the message recovery. Appendix. Okay. It requires the message as an input to the verification algorithm. So this message is usually the signature is usually small, and then it's attached at the end of the message, plain text. And then also it relies on the cryptographic hash functions. We will talk about hash functions too. It's called message digestion. So we'll take an arbitrarily long message and then give you a fixed length output. And the schemes of this type, appendix, Algamol, and DSA. We'll cover these two. We'll cover these two. And then the DSA is the strong competitor of RSA. RSA is the message recovery type, but it can also be used it can also be used using the appendix type. Most people use appendix. Okay. And this Algamol signature algorithm is totally different from the Algamol encryption algorithm. It just bears the name of Algamol. It has pretty much nothing to do with the encryption algorithm. So the Algamol encryption algorithm is closer to the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. So these two are really close, as I already mentioned. But the Algamol signature algorithm is totally different. And then it's actually closer to DSA. DSA is an improved version of the Algamol signature scheme. Signature with message recovery, there are this type. So RSA has this type. Original message is not required, okay, because it can be recovered from the signature itself. Okay, so we have RSA, Rabin, and Nyberg-Ruppel. Breaking a signature scheme, we can divide this, breaking the signature scheme into different levels. There's a total break, selective forgery, and existential forgery. Okay? From a cryptographic point of view, it's not always that you totally break something. If you totally break, that means you compromise the private key. You get the private key. The forgery, when you can forge a message, forge a message with a valid signature, that means you can create a valid signature, but it depends on whether you can you have control over the message or not. It depends on whether you can you want to create this message, whether you can control or not. So if you can create a message on a pre-selected message. So on certain messages you can forge, that is called selective forgery. Existential forgery, that means you have no control over it. Okay? So if it's this case, then it will, even though you can, the adversary can generate some valid signature, and on a pre-selected message, this already poses a big threat to the security. I'll give you an example. The hash algorithm. Hash algorithm is usually used to shorten a message, and then they use hash message to shorten message, and then apply signature algorithm on the hash. Okay. That's the current way to do that. And then before 2005, there is a hash called MD5. MD5. This was proposed by Ron Rivest, and then he believed that MD5 was designed in a really good way, so then it's secure. However, later there is a professor it's a professor from a math department at Shandong University, 叫王小云, and then she was doing research on the number theory, so she never, did anything related to cryptography, but at that moment, starting from like 2002 or something, she started to research on those hash algorithms, and then she found that she can create some collisions of certain hash on MD5 if some conditions are satisfied. And that will actually give a valid output of a signature, because the signature is applied to the hash. So that actually can be applied to the selective forgery of RSA signature, which is a big threat. Yeah. So because of that, MD5 was completely removed. So it's not used MD5 anymore. They use this. There's a SHA. There's different versions. The original SHA was also broken by Wang Xiaoyun as well. 这个就这样，那它就变成说完全，你光是 selective forgery 就可以让系统不能用，基本上就这样。那我说王小云他本来是一个，大家 Google 一下就知道王小云了哈，云是天上的云，但是简体字是这个简体字。这人是山东大学的一个数学，好像是山东大学数学系在做数论的，所以从来没有人知道他是谁。那他在04年就是把 MD5 给找到了一种 collision 方法，让他就可以用在 因为 RSA 的 signature 都是用在先用 MD5 去把它 digest， 然后再 apply， 结果它就造成了 selective forgery， 就造成这件事情。所以说基本上那个 MD5 就不能用 ，RSA signature 是好的，但是它的 hash 是坏，它的 hash 有问题嘛，所以 hash 有问题就不行了。还有我讲说像那个 elliptic curve 哈 ，elliptic curve 也有 signature， 那个也很好，但是 elliptic curve 它里面有一个 random number generation 出了一个问题，它出来的 random number 不够 random， 就是会被人家破解。这个我有讲过嘛哈，我有讲过嘛哈，对啊，就是 elliptic curve 的那个，后来美国的 NSA 发现这个 bug， 他就隐瞒了10年不讲。这我有提过这件事，对啊，然后后来被一个俄国的骇客所发现，还把它抛在网上。那王小云他把这个 MD5， 他把它找到了这个 collision， 就让它 selective forgery 就不行。那之后 SHA 呢，又在2005年也被他破解，所以他后来就被北京的清华大学给招揽过去了，就专门在研究怎么破解人家的这个 hash。他带了十几个 PhD 学生，全部都在去研究如何破解他的 hash， 如何产生 collision 这样子，对啊，基本上是这样子啊。
好，我们先讲到这里好了，今天先讲到这里，好，so let's stop here。